Telling stories is coded in our DNA. Orally passing down stories predates written form. Now, audiobooks seem to have caused a bit of division amongst readers, but it only makes sense that humans still enjoy having stories be read to them in the form of audiobooks. Are you looking for the very best fantasy audiobooks and audiobook narrators of all time? Then look no further. I got you covered. Today I'm going to be going over my personal favorites, and there's a lot of them. Audiobooks are an incredible tool for finishing more books than you normally would. Lately, I have been listening to a ton of audiobooks when I'm driving or doing household chores or whatever, and I know from personal experience that the narrator can either make or break the immersion and just your enjoyment of the story altogether. In some rare cases, I've even come across some narrators that are so good that they actually enhanced the experience of the story for me. And those are the narrators that I always trust. Anyways, I wanted to pass along this knowledge so that you guys know which audiobooks are quality and worth your time. These are my top 20 fantasy audiobooks and audiobook narrators of all time. I might actually mention more than that, I don't know yet. But real quick, this video is sponsored by Established Titles. Do you own land in Scotland? Because you know you could. Established Titles is a fun and original way to preserve the natural woodlands of Scotland and help support global reforestation efforts. Their title packs give you at least 1 square foot of dedicated land and a unique plot number on a private estate in Edelston, Scotland. You even get this fancy official certificate with the crest and everything. If you haven't heard of Established Titles yet, this is a project based on a historic Scottish custom where landowners can be referred to as lairds, or lords and ladies. And with their title packs, you can officially call yourself a lord or lady, and you can put this on your credit card or your dating profile or your plane tickets and so much more. Not only is this a great creative last-minute gift for someone special in your life, but it also helps the planet. They plant a tree with every order, and they work with global charities like One Tree Planted and Trees for the Future to support global reforestation efforts. Now there's another cool detail. The first 200 people to purchase title packs using my link in the description will get a plot that is within walking distance to my own. Do you know what this means? Depending on how many of you want to be called lords or ladies, we can build our own little kingdom and eventually take over the universe. I've always known I should be a lord. Now, Established Titles is actually running a massive November sale right now. Plus, if you use my code LordJ, you get an additional 10% off. Go to establishedtitles.com/LordJ and get your gifts now and help support the channel. Now I know, fantasy fans can be extremely loyal to their favorite narrators, and I'm likely going to miss some of your favorites. So let me know in the comments who your favorite narrators or favorite audiobooks are. Now, the first recommendation is kind of an odd one because I'm recommending several different audiobooks. That is for The Lord of the Rings. The first one I'll mention is narrated by Rob Inglis. Now, this is going to be a hit or miss for some people. Personally, I find it really charming. It has such a beautiful, nostalgic feeling to it. It's like a granduncle reading a bedtime story, or Tolkien himself reading to you, and I loved hearing him sing the songs. However, you're gonna hear some lip smacking and some pauses, but my main criticism for him is that there are certain areas where I start to space out because he doesn't quite convey the adventure or excitement of what's going on. But again, I think this is such a charming classic. Now, I've never listened to the Andy Serkis versions, so I don't have an opinion on those. Let me know what you prefer. Fun fact, Rob Inglis said the Lord of the Rings audiobooks were all recorded in an intense 6-week period.
What?
Take some time to simply process that. The next version I want to mention is the 1981 BBC version. This isn't exactly an audiobook. It's more of a radio play, but it is pretty much a masterpiece. I love it so much. I have the original cassette edition here, which is pretty cool because it actually has it's got a pamphlet that has the full cast and also this fold-out map and some information about Tolkien on the back. Now, this dramatization is abridged. There's no Tom Bombadil, unfortunately, but the performances by Ian Holm, who plays Frodo in this production, and also he plays Bilbo in the films, as well as all the other performances, are truly magnificent. And you can actually find these for free online at archive.org. But if I had to recommend the best audio experience for The Lord of the Rings, for me, that was the narration by Phil Dragash. This was a passion project of his, so he did it completely free. And the way that he personifies each character, and also he adds in the film scores and sound effects from the movies. I feel like he brings these books to life like no other narrator could. The Rage of Dragons was Evan Winter's debut novel, which was originally self-published as an ebook before becoming so popular that it got picked up for a formal publication. And it is a fantastic revenge story. The talented voice of Audie Award finalist and Hall of Fame narrator Prentice Onayemi does such a great job narrating this story. Tao's personal quest and the war that rages on around him takes on a whole new layer of complexity and intrigue due to the narration just completely drawing you in and holding you there until the very last word. It captures you in words. Julia Whelan is a fantastic narrator. I don't think she does a whole lot of fantasy, but she did narrate The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and then also the original as well. She's narrated a ton of stuff like Gone Girl, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, Year One, a lot of other books. She must be very busy. Also, quite a while back, I had the opportunity to interview her, and she's just an awesome person to talk to as well. The Chronicles of Narnia, the Radio Theater audio edition, is one that's extremely nostalgic to me. This is the one that me and my family used to listen to when we went on road trips. And the production value, the performances, everything is just high quality, really well done. The only thing I didn't like was Aslan's voice. It was a little bit grating since he tried to add like a feline tone to it. But other than that, I really enjoyed it and it's worth the listen. Next we have The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison. This book in general is just extremely underrated. It falls into the sort of obscure subgenre called fantasy of manners. Think elves and goblins kind of acting out Jane Austen. There's subtle social commentary, a kind of steampunk aesthetic, and a warm-hearted hero who you're going to be rooting for the whole time. It won the Locus Award and nominations for the Nebula, Hugo, and World Fantasy Awards as well. Now the narrator, Kyle McCarley, has a very smooth and sort of posh-sounding narration that really captures the stifling formality of the court life, and I loved following Maya's journey from innocence to wisdom through his narration. Next we have Neil Gaiman, one of fantasy's greatest treasures, basically reading any of his book series that he's written, whether it's Neverwhere, The Graveyard Book, The Ocean at the End of the Lane, all of them are great. I also need to mention the Sandman production by Neil Gaiman that is on Audible. I have been really enjoying the comics, but I thought that the artwork was integral to the story and that the audio version of it would not work at all. I was wrong. It really does work. It's a full cast production with music and sound effects to accompany it. I loved it. It's honestly one of the best things I've listened to on Audible. That's a pretty high recommendation right there. The Gentleman Bastard series by Scott Lynch is basically if you take Ocean's 11 and bring it into a fantasy world. We got a band of dashing small-time con artists that's led by an elegant thief named Locke Lamora. This is a very clever story with a lot of humor and some amazing characters, not to mention one of the best bromances. Audie Award winner Michael Page narrates The Gentleman Bastards, and he embraces the dialogue and the witty banter with such enthusiasm. It's almost like a theatrical display, and he has this incredible flexibility with pitch. He delivers the banter and the twisting plots with such ease that it feels like he's made to read Lynch's writing. His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman, not only narrated by an amazing full cast of narrators, but also by Philip Pullman himself. Authors narrating their books can either be a hit or miss, but Philip Pullman proves himself to be as skilled a narrator as he is a world builder. Backed by a first-rate cast, he ushers in listeners into the beautiful multiverse of His Dark Materials. All 3 installments together is like 32 hours of listening pleasure, and they all won the Earphone Awards, so you know that it's quality. The Witcher books by Andrzej Sapkowski, narrated by Peter Kenny. He's one of the best narrators that I've heard. The man does accents, he sings, and that thing that he does when he's playing the mermaid, that was honestly just wow. Peter honestly does more than an amazing job at reading these books and conveying the characters' emotions and feelings, and at times I even find it hard to believe that he's only one person reading these. I feel thankful for how much he's brought these characters to life, and how much I've enjoyed the Witcher audiobooks because of that. The Old Kingdom trilogy by Garth Nix is one of my favorites of all time, and I just recently actually found out that the audiobooks narrated by Tim Curry are fantastic. I can't believe I haven't listened to them until just recently. Honestly, it almost feels more like a performance than narration. He also does a fantastic job narrating the series of unfortunate events. Hearing Tim Curry narrate Mogget, the cat, that's like the best animal companion in any book ever, is just pure perfection. His narration alone of that character is worth listening to these books. Also, I mean, come on guys, the Old Kingdom trilogy is extremely underrated. People do not talk about it enough. So please, read it. Stephen Fry's narration for The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is one of my favorites of all time. I'm a big fan of these books, and his narration is fantastic. He also narrates the Harry Potter books, and there's another narrator, Jim Dale. There's 2 different versions, and a lot of fans, you know, they have a battle back and forth about who is better. I'm gonna go with Stephen Fry because I enjoy his narration in Hitchhiker's Guide, so I'm a little bit biased. I need to mention Dune 100%. It has a full cast of characters, ambient music. You can hear the wind blowing over the sand in some of the transition scenes. It is a really immersive audio experience. I'm actually making my way through it, so I haven't finished it yet, but already I'm gonna recommend it. The Discworld books by Terry Pratchett, narrated by Nigel Planner. His performance is like first class. The recording is fairly old, but he's so good. You feel the irony from beginning to end. I love the voices he does for all the characters. His inflection, accents, and delivery pace all really help bring the characters to life. And overall, I just think he's a fantastic narrator for Discworld and for its type of humor. And Nigel was handpicked by Terry Pratchett to narrate the audiobooks because he truly understood the British seriousness and yet silly humor. The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher, you know, is like an all-star of urban fantasy. It brings you into the underbelly of Chicago, where there's vampires and werewolves and fairies and all types of supernatural creatures. And James Marsters masterfully narrates Harry Dresden. It feels like he's made for the role. I have really been enjoying the audiobooks for the Dresden Files, and James Marsters' voice is just always going to be Harry Dresden for me now. He's really skilled, and I feel like I'm noticing he's starting to get better as I'm like past book 3. I notice his narration is even getting better. There's a reason why this is many fantasy fans' favorite audio series. And of course, I can't make a video like this without mentioning the award-winning audiobook narrators Michael Kramer and Kate Redding. For a lot of fantasy fans, these are their go-to narrators, and I understand why. They have narrated some incredible fantasy books like the whole Wheel of Time and the Stormlight Archive, and I personally have spent hundreds of hours listening to their narration. Now, I've grown to find their voices quite comforting because I've spent so much time listening to them, but it actually took a while for their narration to grow on me. When I was reading the Stormlight Archive, it just wasn't quite clicking with me. Michael Kramer kind of has a little bit of a monotone performance, then sometimes Kate Redding's inflection and tone just feels a little bit off from what I would think it would be from just reading the book, but obviously they have their reputation in the fantasy genre for a reason. While they did take some time to grow on me, I still enjoy listening to them, and like I said, I find it kind of comforting. And the Wheel of Time audiobooks are some of my favorites. But there's another Wheel of Time audiobook. Rosamund Pike narrating The Eye of the World, I think I actually enjoyed more. She adds a lot of emotion to her performance. Her skills as an actress have definitely carried over, and I'm excited for more Wheel of Time books narrated by her. Now, you all know I'm a pretty big fan of The Kingkiller Chronicle by Patrick Rothfuss, and there is 2 different audio versions. One is narrated by Nick Podell, and the other is by Rupert Dragash, I believe. I have only listened to the Nick Podell audiobooks, and they're some of my favorites. Other than the Kingkiller Chronicle, he's narrated the King's Dark Tidings and the Moontide Quartet, to name a few. And I also did really enjoy his performance in the King's Dark Tidings books. Nick Podell is pretty much a narrator that I'm always gonna trust. But specifically, the way that he approaches Rothfuss's Kingkiller Chronicle, this thoughtful, gripping story, is just so perfect. He really lets Kvothe's personality shine through. We feel for him throughout his journey from child prodigy to world-weary, walking tragedy, hero in hiding. And Nick Podell's performance during the time when Ari is comforting Kvothe, that is one of my favorite scenes of the entire audiobook because he conveys so much emotion that you might not pick up on just reading it. Now, I also want to mention graphic audio. These are not your usual audiobooks. Their tagline is a movie in your mind, and that's pretty accurate. They have music, sound effects, and a full cast and everything. And I listened to the graphic audio version of Warbreaker. It was fantastic. They also have a version of the Rhaeria Chronicles, the Stormlight Archive, the Lightbringer books, and plenty of others. It's pretty much my favorite compromise between audio drama and audiobook, and you can now find a lot of them over on Audible. And in my number one spot is Stephen Pacey's narration of the first Law books by Joe Abercrombie. These are gritty, grimdark fantasy with a touch of dry humor, and they're fantastic if you haven't read them yet. And delivering an iconic performance with nimble dexterity is Stephen Pacey. He adds a lot of emotional resonance and a delicious layer of characterization. Pacey's different character voices are remarkable. I can't imagine anyone else ever giving voice to these characters. The snarky sneer of Glokta, and the fact that he gave Glokta a lisp because Glokta is missing teeth, was such a clever choice. He also does a pretty good job at providing voices to women without sounding like a horrible falsetto. Honestly, Stephen Pacey kind of ruined audiobooks for me in a good way. If you're new to audiobooks, I wouldn't recommend starting with Pacey because then you're going to have very high standards.
They must be sick of this voice.
He gives such individual voice to the characters that you can tell who it is before even hearing their name. And that is in part due to Joe Abercrombie as well, because Joe Abercrombie has excellent character voice in his writing. You can tell from the first chapter whose point of view it is.
It's a huge gift. All these characters are so multi-layered and so interesting to do.
I had the wonderful opportunity to interview Joe Abercrombie and Stephen Pacey, which looking back on it, I wish I wasn't so starstruck, but they were really great to talk to together. You can tell they get along really well.
But and some of the pronunciations he must have winced at. I mean, and some of the places we go and all those sorts of things, you must have had different ideas in your head for that. But so if I got it right, 5 times out of 10, I'm pleased. But
the other thing is you can't get it wrong because your version is now the kind of received wisdom. Occasionally I'll talk to someone who reads the audiobooks and I'll say the name of the place or the person the way I tend to say it, and they'll be like, what now? Because they hear it a different way, and so they
that must be so annoying.
only tiny bit.
The fact that he made it to the top of my best fantasy narrators list based solely on one series should say something. Say one thing for Stephen Pacey. He's amazing. So those are my top fantasy audiobooks and audiobook narrators of all time. There's probably a lot that I didn't mention that are your favorites, so let me know in the comments because I would like some recommendations as well. There's a lot I haven't listened to, and I'm always looking for the next audiobook to listen to. Also, if you're looking for another video to watch, consider watching my top 10 fantasy worlds of all time video because I put a ton of work into that and I hope you enjoy it. Also, a big thank you to my patrons. Recently, because of you guys, I have been able to upgrade my microphone. This is not my new mic. This is my old Blue Yeti microphone that I've had for years. I have to heavily edit my audio every video to make it sound good, but I ordered the Beacon microphone and I'm super excited for that to arrive. Maybe then I'll narrate my own audiobooks. Probably not. Also, just a big thank you to you who's watched to the very end of this video. This is it, the very end.